Alright, so in this video we're going to show you how to remove the Inkbay chip reader, which is pretty much located in here. There's a few things you want to do prior to this. You definitely want to look over the video on how to remove your capping station and your mount plate motor. So first things first, we're going to remove all the screws that connect this front cover. Alright, there's pretty much screws that look like this with the washer on the bottom. There's one here. There's one in the inside here. There's one here, 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 and here. And on the sides, you also have some screws. One here, and on the opposite side, you have two. One here, and right down below, you have them on both sides. All right. So I'm just going to take that out. We pretty much have most of them off for time purposes for the video. So I'm just going to take these two off, and we're just going to remove this front housing. Alright, just put that off to the side. Now you're going to remove this covering here. So all you have to do is, there's a screw to remove the blue lever cover, the lever lock cover. So I'm just going to unscrew that. Make sure you try to keep the screw with its counterpart, so that way you're not mixing and matching the screws. And then we're going to take the screws out of the cover of the Inkbay. There's 4 of them. So there's one here. There's one here. Good idea to make sure you guys have a magnetic screwdriver so that you don't lose any of the screws. We have another one on the bottom here, and this one's already out, but there's also a screw on this side that you're going to want to remove. And once you do that, it pretty much slides right out. Alright, once you take the housing, the cover off of the front Inkbay slots, we're just going to remove these brackets here. It's really important with these brackets that we put them back on the actual housing. So what I'm going to do is pretty much put them back in there. These brackets are different sizes, so if you put them wrong, the cover will not go back the right way. So this actually goes on this side. So I'm going to put the screw in, and I'm just going to tighten up this bracket here, just so that I know when I put this back in place, I can now have them on the right slots. And all I have to do is just screw them in from here. Alright, so we're going to do that on both sides. Okay, so once you have the covers, the front covers off, now what you're going to do is come over to the back here, and we're going to remove the bracket or the housing for the Inkbay needle slots. So you have 4 screws. One here, which I'm going to take off. It's a good idea to have a nice long screwdriver. Alright. And then you have 2 more laying on the bottom platform. Alright, one here and one on the opposite side. So once you've removed the 2 screws here and the 2 screws on the inside wall, this bracket pretty much slides right up and out, and pretty much gets you to the view of your Inkbay needles. Alright, one of the things you're going to have to do is remove this bracket or this bar, the Inkbay bar, and you can do that by just popping it right out. Alright, just grab a screwdriver, pop it right back out. Also, there's a video on how to put this back in, because there's definitely a specific angle and slotting that you want to angle this back into. Otherwise, it will not work correctly. So you can definitely find that video. Once you have taken that out, I'm going to come around to the front, and there's 2 screws. You have one here and one here. They're pretty long screws, and actually, if you put your finger under it, you can feel the screw on the actual plate or the metal bracket to hold it in. And you're just going to take those screws out, and that's going to loosen out the housing for your ink bay needles and the ink bay chip reader. Alright, once you loosen those up, you're going to now take out these ribbon cables. So you have 4 of them for each individual color. Just going to pop them right out. Alright, and lastly, you're just going to slide by pulling it forward. Be very gentle. And the reason why I say that is you have your ink lines here, and if you want to see your ink lines a lot better, you can easily do that by removing the front interface. There's only one screw that holds that in place, and you can just pop this off, ribbon cable, and put it to the side, and you can get a better angle now of what your ink lines look like and where they're at. So you could just peel off this black tape that holds it, and we're just going to slide these up. Be very careful not to bend or kink these lines, otherwise you're going to have air escaping or pressure escaping and air coming into your ink lines, and that's never good for your machine. Alright, so be really gentle. There's also a sensor here that you're going to want to unplug, and that pretty much comes in through the side of the machine and out this side here. So if you need to pretty much get a better angle at it, or you need some extra slack, you can always loosen it up through the sides here. Alright, so what I'm going to do is just pull this up, back, and there goes your sensor. And now I can actually see and have a good view of my ink bays, the needles, which are these, the reader, which is these up here, and the ones that are inside. So for camera purposes, so that you guys can see a little bit better, this is the reader, these pins here, and then it pretty much connects to the ribbon cable reader, which is in the back. Okay, so once you have removed your metal housing, what you're going to do is remove all of the ink tubes from their J-joint slots. This helps make maneuvering a little bit easy. And also, each one of the ink bay slots has a screw that holds it in place on the side. So you're just going to remove the actual screw of the chip reader that you're going to be replacing at this time. And also we're going to remove each screw that holds the bottom bracket in place. So I'm just going to take out this last one since the other one's already removed. And then we're going to go back to the front. And same thing with the front. These are going to be already removed. You're only going to have 2 left. We're going to take those 2 out to get that metal bracket from the bottom off. Alright, so we're just going to remove those 2 screws. And when you do this, be very careful, because now the bottom plate is pretty much detached from the housing here. And you're going to have all these plastic brackets that pretty much are going to be in place. I mean, if they do fall out, don't worry about them. They're meant to come out, and you're just going to put them back into their slots. Now we're going to maneuver the housing over, and again we're going to take out the screw that is holding the ink bay needle bracket together. Alright, and once we do that, you should now be able to push down on the ink bay bracket and pull it right out. So after we remove the ink bay needle slot, we're going to take the ink bay needle out, because we're going to use the housing of the new chip. We don't have to take this chip out at this point. So just the silver screws are the ones that we're going to remove, and just be real careful with the screws not to drop them out. And I'm just going to take the 2 at the bottom off, just like that. And at this point we're going to put the new one in its place, screw it back in, nice and tucked, and we're going to go back over to the frame. And again, these 2 slots here are going to go into these holes to pretty much lock it in place. Alright, so start from the bottom, which is probably the best bet here. And then you're just going to line them up, and you see how it's going to not only snap in this spot, it's also going to snap up here on this clip. Alright, once we've done that, you're going to want to lay your bottom plate on a nice flat surface. Alright, with these pieces, remember, being on the rear. It's going to pretty much face the rear of your Inkbay needles. And there's holes, 2 holes on each metal bracket. One hole is going to be for this little stem here on your plastic base. And the other hole is going to be to pretty much get the screw in. So the second hole is where I'm going to place the black stem on each individual slot. Alright. And I'm going to do the same for the back, and then you're going to want to make sure that this piece is pretty much just underneath there. It's going to stay underneath there nice and loosely. It's just designed to hold it. On the rear, you're also going to see the same thing. The black stem in the back, front hole is going to be for your screw. And you're just going to hold them together as best as you can, grab your screw, and pretty much put them back into place. And you're going to do the same thing for all 4 sides. The front, you're going to just remember that there's only 2 screws that go in the front, in the middle, because the other ones are going to get locked into your front bracket down here at the bottom. Last ones on the back on. All right. So once you have all of the screws back in, now you can just go ahead and put back the nuts to your J-joint. Make sure that when you're putting these back in that you have the O-ring pretty much connected, the rubber O-ring. Otherwise, you're not going to have good pressure and your machine's just pretty much not going to maintain its ink pressure. So in this case, this one popped out. So I'm just going to put it over the hole. And just push it down. Alright. And get it right back in there. Finger tight, please only. Do not use any wrench or any tool. These are plastic pieces, and you're pretty much going to strip the threading on the J-joint. So always finger tight. Alright. Once you've gotten them all back into place, you can now place the housing right on top of its slot. First, we're going to connect our sensor wire. Again, remembering to give it some slack if you need to. You could always grab some of the slack off of the side here, releasing some of these locking mechanisms. And you're just going to snap that right in there. And now when we're going to push this in, because there's a lip here, and you have these holding brackets here that pretty much rest itself behind the lip so it doesn't slide out, you're going to push down on those brackets with your fingers. So we're just going to push down on these to get them behind there, and then this piece pretty much slides right into place. Alright, at this point we're going to put the Inkbay or the ink tubes back into place, and if you need to get some new black tape, you can also do that and put it back into place if it's not sticky anymore. And again, with your long screws, we're going to hold the bracket in place by putting the first 2 screws in that we initially took off in the beginning. So once we've done that, we're going to go back to the back of the machine. And we're just going to make sure that we have taken the slack out of the sensor that we plugged in. So we can pull some of that slack back into that hole, just to make sure there's no interference when the machine is on and operating the way it should. All right. If you need to, you can pull the ribbon cables out, like I did here, and then they go right back into that specific hole, one by one. So the long one first, second one. All right. Now once you have the slack out, it's just as simple as lining the ribbon cables back up with the sensor or the reader. And you don't want to use too much force. So we're just going to line them up. First one, push it in. Second, just going to line it up, push in. Third one, line it up, push it in. And the last one, line it up, push it in. So now we're just going to put this back in. Again, there's a video on how to specifically put it in. I'm pretty much going to put it in pretty quickly, as I already know how to get it in there. But there's a video that you guys will be able to see that's going to show you how to do this. As you are going to see in the video on how to replace this black bar, you're going to want to test it, but after you've tested it, do not touch it, otherwise it's going to pop out. As long as you leave it like this, it should stay in its place. And what's going to happen is this metal bracket is going to hold it in its place as you lift and lower that lever. So we're just going to put this bracket in. Remember, it goes in front of the two brackets resting at the bottom. All right. And then you're just going to replace it by putting all 4 screws back in. So now we're just going to put the pieces back together. So first thing we're going to do is put our interface back together. Again, lining up the ribbon cable with the contacts inside. Always line them up first on an angle, and then you can just push and pop it back in place. And then you can actually line this back up. There's actually like a little nipple there that'll pretty much go into the front slot to get it into that hole. And then you can just take the screw with your screwdriver, obviously. And just screw it right back in. Get it in that place. And then all you're going to do left is put your main covers back on, starting with these brackets. And if you need to, just to get the brackets in place better, you can just loosen this screw up just slightly so that we can have a little bit of play to move it if we need to move it to get it into these slots on the side. And what I'm going to do is just push these up. And on this side, it's pretty much lined in there. Just want to make sure that the other side is also lined in there. Yep, looks like it is. Perfect. And I'm just going to take a screwdriver, tighten it up. And same thing on the other side. Grab the screw. tight, and go back and retrace. Make sure you tighten up the two front ones here, and also one here and one here. And finally, once you're done screwing everything in place, all 4 screws, you can now put your lock blue cover on. And from the side, as we did earlier, we're just going to screw that back in. With plastic, I like to always go back first so that I don't make a rethreading of it and then go forward. Alright? And lastly, we're just going to put this cover back on. Sliding it on top first. And also making sure you got it nice and leveled on the bottom underneath here so that the screws can go in snugged. Once you've done this, go back, look over how to replace your capping station unit, replacing all the motors you've taken out, and there you go.